Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by Harness and AWS. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we've got another exciting program for you. Before we begin, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you'd like to engage with our speakers today, you can do so using a couple of the options on the right side of your screen. First of which is the chat tab. So I'd like you to go ahead and test that chat tab for me by letting us know from where you are joining us today. Right beside the chat tab to the right, you'll notice there's a Q&A portion as well. For any questions that you have today, we want you to send those into our Q&A, and we will try to address as many as we can toward the end. We do have some handouts available under that handouts tab, so feel free to collect those. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of our program. So our topic today is Build Securely by Default with Harness and AWS. And I'm joined by Troy Mangum, Director of CI/CD at Harness, and Welly Saw, Principal Partner Solutions Architect for DevOps at AWS. So Troy and Welly, thank you both so much for joining me today. Welly, do you want to go ahead and get this kicked off?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cody. I will start by maybe just sharing my screen. So we have the presentation in here. Perfect. All right. So yeah, welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much to spend your time today on your busy schedules. I know you could be everywhere else, a lot of work to do, but you're here investing your time today with us. Today, we're going to talk about how you build securely with Harness and AWS. But before that, I want to address some of the trend that we keep seeing over the last couple of years. And that trend is about shifting left on your DevOps life cycles. Now, why do we actually shift left to uh, and keep going to this shift left mentality in here? There's a lot of potential root cause of that, but one of them is the external driver for change. As you can see in here, there's a couple of studies that we do from sonotypes that seems that has been 6-time increase in terms like supply chain events that related to some security incidents. And around the same time, Linux Foundations also did some research, and they found that the organizations embracing open source more and more and more. We see in here that about 98% of the companies and organizations that they study have some sort of a use of the open source. At the same time, you can see in here, Synopsys did a research and they found like about 81% of the open source tool projects that they scan have at least one or more vulnerability. So these are one example of the driver for the change into shifting left in terms like the security. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because there are a lot of other benefit of doing that. So today I want to start by talking about how you start your DevSecOps journey in AWS. My name is Welly Xiao. I'm a principal partner solution architect here on AWS, and I'm focused on the DevOps segments. So when we say security, let's talk about what AWS think about security. You've probably heard this a lot. We say security is always a top priority. But what does that actually mean? It means also that security is everyone's responsibility, not just the developer, not just a DevOps, not just a product team, but including the leaderships. One good example of that was a story about security vulnerability that happens internally within the Amazons. And we have everybody from the developers, the technical resource, all the way to the leaderships on the same call. And why is that? Because when you have that scale of issues and decision has to be made, the right persons and the right technical level of understanding of that issue has to be in the same room. Whether the leadership has to make a decisions about, patching across thousands of instances and how that will impact, for example, the deadline of the products, all the way to the developers that have to make the decisions about how things should be done. And when we say security, it's not about stopping you from doing your work. Security is about putting a guardrail in place to ensure you have a safe environment to actually innovate faster. So it means guardrails, detective and preventive guardrails, and also explanation how that guardrail is being used to ensure that you understand the feedback loop that the tool provided to you rather than just stopping you from doing certain things. And at the same time, security is a journey. You start small, you have a very close feedback loop, and you continue to improve that. It shouldn't be just a one check mark for one quarter to say you are doing security and next month you're moving to something else. It's not like that. Security is continuously evolving and you should be looked at as the journey. And when we say security, sometimes you've seen this sample of the slides a lot. We call it the shared responsibility, where we typically say AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, and you as the customers, you are responsible for security in the cloud. So what does that mean? Security of the cloud include, for example, the hardware and the global infrastructures, and that's include maybe storage, compute, networking layers as well, and could be including some of the software depending on types of the services that you use. For example, running your VM on EC2 instance, or you may be running your database on relational RDS. And you as a customer, you're still responsible for security in the cloud. And the key takeaway in here is that you have control over your data, how you store that data, who you give access to that data as well. It means encryptions. It means how you define access to that data, how you move that data in and out from the AWS. And with that, you also have some controls over your operating systems, network, firewalls, and etc. Again, depending on the types of services that you use. And we'll come back to this. But let's talk about what is DevSecOps. So we know about DevOps. I think a lot of you are already doing that. What really difference about DevSecOps with the regular DevOps is just that it's about combination of culture, practice, and also tool that takes the advantages of a lot of the automations that are made possible in the DevOps practice today, including from the tool, open source libraries, the cloud, the API-driven architectures that allows you to have frequent delivery of feature and functionality, and at the same time also automate the enforcement of the security. At the essence is the shift left itself. And it's done by integrating a lot of those automations and also allow for enforcement of the controls such as detective and preventive controls and have a feedback loop that provide a response to a security incidents or findings itself. So what it takes to get into a good DevSecOps practice. When we talk with a lot of customers, we observe what they do. We see they are doing a lot of the items in here, from having a good CI/CD practice. Um, you do have to have that in order to automate a lot of things that you need to do. That's the essentially almost the backbone of it. Then having a observability that allows you to measure um, what you agree on the organization level as the KPI, and also use that to respond to the security incidents or any findings within the pipelines. Infrastructure as code is no longer an optional, is a must. That's really how you define your infrastructures and also implement a lot of these guardrails as part of the infrastructure as code. Having a artifact management or source management is also important to ensure that you vetted the source and libraries and artifacts that you want to use, and ensuring the organization are you only using the one that's been approved. And of course, having a security practice and also resiliency. When we talk about DevSecOps, sometimes it's really forgotten that the security is not about just how you protect the data, but it's also about the availability of that data itself. So when we say shift left, alongside all of the couple of the components that I mentioned earlier, typically this is what shift left looks like. You all may be familiar with penetration testing, how you do external tests to find any vulnerabilities or any potential issues or maybe open ports and etc. But it also includes static analysis, where you look at your code, finding maybe potential unsafe use of methods, maybe hard-coded secrets, for example. dynamic analysis as well, where you run your applications and look how it behaves with the memory, with the file systems, with the storage, and to see if there is any unsafe executions. And also including like composition analysis to look at all of your tools and library and the dependencies and finding any vulnerabilities within the software components. And of course, not forgetting policy as code, because you have to implement those guardrails and codify it as part of your infrastructures and also as part of your pipelines. And you can see in here, all of that kind of fit into the DevOps cycles. From when you build your code and you commit your code, you can do secret detection, for example, to look at any hard-coded secrets. When you build and run a test, for example, you can run static analysis and also dynamic analysis. When you look at deployment, for example, this is where you deploy with those guardrails, maybe in infrastructure as code, in CloudFormation, or in Terraforms. And you can also look and run vulnerability assessments before you run your deploy, so you ensure that you are not deploying a vulnerable software, for example. And we look at the end of that cycles, monitorings and plans. This is again when you run compliance checks. You can also run additional penetration tests and doing eventually some sort of like well-architected review as well. So the DevSecOps lifecycle itself fits into every part of this. But we're coming back to a shared responsibility. The DevSecOps is also a shared responsibility. Remember earlier I mentioned about security of the cloud and security in the cloud. In the same way, you can take a look at this as security of the pipelines and security in the pipelines. AWS and sometimes AWS partners are responsible for the security of the pipelines. And what is that intakes in terms of security of the pipelines? That means protecting the infrastructure of the pipeline itself from having a proper logging and auditing, alerting, patching for the infrastructure that runs your pipelines, authentications, authorizations, encryptions, key managements, and also config managements. Essentially protecting those pipelines to ensure that any additional like a shift left in terms like protections that you do within the pipelines are not being compromised because someone else may have access to the pipeline and make those changes. And that's the security of the pipelines. And a lot of things you can upload to the AWS. For example, if you're running your pipeline in AWS, then you probably may be trying to run it either in code pipelines or maybe in a solution such as Harness, for example. And where that happens, you offload a lot of this responsibility to the partners or to the AWS. And we say security in the pipeline, this is again coming back to some of the items that I mentioned earlier. Secret analysis, software component analysis, static and dynamic analysis, policy as code, and many more. So a lot of this you have to incorporate into your pipelines depending on your organization needs and how you define those requirements itself. We'll let try to talk a little bit more about that, but a couple key takeaway from here. When it's starting your journey of DevSecOps, um, first thing you have to understand, of course, security is always the top priority, and that's including everybody, you and me, and also the leaderships. And you want to automate a lot. You want to automate everything you can find, and you want to find things that you can automate as well. That's really the key in here. And you do want to introduce security as early as possible and have that feedback loop that close as possible. What I mean by that is that if I'm doing local development in my laptop, for example, and I committed the code to my local repo, I should be able to figure out if I'm maybe making some, rookie mistake by storing a credential. Those does not have to wait until it goes to the pipelines to be detected. That's a kind of example of the closed feedback loops. And the closer you can get that feedback loop to the person that introduced the problems, that's the better. And with that, you also want to include your organization security controls. There's a lot of open source tools and framework out there, but it's also important to understand what is your organization requirements in terms like data boundary and how you translate that into the security within the pipelines. So you have to work with, for example, your CISO, with your security teams to understand what is their objective and how you translate that objective into an automation and tool within the pipeline. So I hope that key takeaway is helpful to kind of set the stage in here. And now I want to hand it over to Troy to talk a little bit more about Harness. So Troy, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Willie. Let me share my screen. All right. So if you guys could confirm, you guys can see this?
Yes, we can try.
Thank you so much. All right, guys. So so excited to introduce potentially to some of you who Harness is and how we are integrating and partnering with AWS. One of the things I want to encourage you during this presentation is we have subject matter experts, Anurav, on the chat. So if you have specific questions about Harness, DevSecOps, the exciting part about what I'm going to present to you is we're going to be showing you how to do a lot of what Willie was talking about. So with that shared security model, there's going to be a lot that you have to take on. And we believe that our partnership with AWS and we believe we have an amazing, simple and secure offering with what we provide. So let's talk about Harness just for a moment. So who are we? We were founded in 2016. We have, at this point, I think over 800 employees. And we have over 500 customers. You can see who is backing us and who has kind of funded us. We are a startup in the CI/CD space. And what do we provide? So we are an end-to-end software delivery platform. In that, we have currently 7 interdependent and independent software modules that you can purchase from us. We are a SaaS as well as on-premises offering. So you can see we have continuous integration and continuous delivery as well as GitOps. So that's our CI/CD piece. We have security testing orchestration. We're going to be digging into these 3 modules in depth in this presentation, and we're going to show how these interact as well to really do kind of DevSecOps out of the box. We, in addition, have these additional modules that you may be of interest. The one on the far right, we just acquired a company called Propello. They're a value stream management company, and we have renamed them Software Engineering Insights, and just want to highlight that one. So that's us in a nutshell. What I want to do is I'm going to be going through CI, CD, and STO, and then I'm going to show how everything kind of fits together to be sort of DevSecOps in a box. And again, please, if you have questions, please shoot us chat or interact with us in the Q&A. We can answer those live. And what we don't answer, we'll answer it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's talk about CI for a moment. We're really proud about CI. We are 4x faster than any other CI vendor in the market. We have hosted builds and test intelligence. Test intelligence is an ability to do code analysis on your code and being able to determine what tests you should and shouldn't run, or we recommend you don't have to run because it doesn't affect where the code was changed. And that's an ability to accelerate some of your test cycles, especially in development. And we also have cache intelligence, and that's the ability to cache commonly used items so that you don't have to continually pull down dependencies, slowing down your build process. Again, you can see some examples here of us testing against GitHub Actions and other vendors with some popular open source repos. If this is of interest to you and you're looking for a faster build experience, we have our testing methodology here, and you can click that, or you can just type into Google 4x faster CI, and you'll find our test methodology and how we achieve this. So with continuous delivery, we also have GitOps as well. So what you effectively do is we have the code to artifact section. That's going to be our CI. And then the artifact to the customer, that's going to be our CD portion. Based on our platform, we have the ability to have end-to-end visibility across all of our modules Like I said before, these things are independent. So you can buy them individually or you can bind them together. And so we're going to be talking about CI/CD and our security testing orchestration and how that looks like together. But for CD, you can see we have release automation and enterprise GitOps. We have the ability to do pipeline templating and management. We have continuous verification. This is a proprietary offering from us. It's AI/ML informed using external, I'll show you when we do the demo, but effectively it allows us to, once you click go, we can modify how the pipeline and the build is going and the deployment is going, and then auto rollback if you hit any thresholds that you've set to say, hey, if it does this, please auto rollback, so you can get that feedback quickly. In our platform, we have secrets management, we have RBAC, we have audit trail capability and compliance as well. And so I'm gonna show you everything today. So this is just a quick snapshot. So security testing orchestration, we have over 60 integrations with maybe some of the premier SAST and DAST and source code analysis tools out there. So we have a very broad ecosystem. So whatever you're using today, we likely support it and are providing an orchestrator for it. And so what does our orchestrator do? Well, it provides automation. And so we have full integration into CI/CD, and you can provide automation to kick things off, compile results, deduplicate and prioritize those results in an enterprise dashboard, which I'm going to show you. We can provide configurable governance, and we do that a lot through the open policy agent that we provide in our platform, as well as we provide the ability to have RBAC controls as well as audit trails. Like I said, we do prioritize and dedupe the results, and we have over 60 integrations with multiple vendors. As far as how it's integrated with CI and CD, we have SaaS vendors integrated at the CI stage, and we can do static and dynamic testing in the CD phase. So what's going on with DevSecOps in general? This is from Gartner and D-Zone, and essentially what they're reporting is that, and what many people are experiencing, is that application shifting the responsibility is moving left. So you've got application developers, you have security teams, and you have platform engineering teams or DevOps engineering teams. And all of that security responsibility is starting to shift more and more towards developers. In fact, in this Gartner report, 50% of developers are now directly responsible for security testing. And the other piece that's interesting is that they're having less and less time, actually 2x less time, to fix the issues that they find. So when they find the issue and the time to fix it is starting to become a real cognitive load on developers. Another thing that we're seeing is that DevSecOps as a practice has really gone into the mainstream. So you can see in 2019, it was about 40% of organizations were doing DevSecOps, but Gartner is reporting that 90% of folks will be involved in DevSecOps in some way, shape, or fashion. And so it's really important that these three organizations and three, application developers, platform engineers, as well as the security teams are working in tandem, working with automation, and working with great partners like AWS. So this is what it might look like today. So you start with development with a code repo, and then you do like static testing. We have some vendors that we support here, very popular vendors. And then after the artifact is built, you can do open source scanners, such as with Black Duck or Synops. And then what the container image is in those paths, the container image is built. You might use Aqua to do sort of container scanning before you upload. And then once it goes into sort of a dev or a QA environment, you might start doing dynamic testing at that point before you really get into the production deployment. So you can see that if you're working across all these vendors, they're spinning out their own dashboards, their own data, their own results. And a lot of times what we're hearing from customers is to be able to compile and deduplicate and work with all these different vendors is quite a load on the security teams, development teams, as well as the platform engineering teams. So there should be a better way. Here's a great, very typical example we hear from customers is engineering. They submit the code and then sort of wait. And eventually it gets through the process, and that could be from a few days to even like a week or more. And then they hear back from the security team, hey, these issues were discovered, you need to fix that. Well, that loop of time, engineering would have loved to have heard and gotten feedback on those security issues immediately. And we're going to show you how to do that with Harness in this webinar. So what would be an ideal state? Well, what we have here is the integration of our CI product, which is that code repo to build artifact phase, and the ability to do security testing at that phase and get quick feedback to the developers before the artifact is even compiled and built. And then post the artifact, being able to do that sort of additional scanning there at that stage, and then get a feedback then. And you can see how CI and STO work together, which is our security testing orchestration piece. And then you can see from the build artifact to production how it's integrated with CD. And I'm going to be showing you that in a demo in just a moment. So some of the use cases, obviously shift left is a primary use case. And why to shift left? Reduce rework. And so you don't have to you can get that feedback as quick as possible, and that's really critical. From an automation standpoint, being able to automate everything and using the latest technology to be able to simplify those results so that they can be actionable and done completely. And then giving that security team the ability to see everything across a simplified single dashboard, plus with the governance embedded into the whole process to ensure that it's secure end to end. So like I said, there's these three folks that are working and they have different goals. And so on the security team side, they're really looking at risk postures. They're looking at trying to get visibility into security issues as early as possible and the need for collaboration across these other teams. They typically might be frustrated with non-integrated tooling or the manual effort to compile everything. On the application developer side, they're wanting good quality code. They don't want to get delayed or have to do any kind of refactoring because they heard about security issues late. And they're frustrated when that happens, or with manual processes. And then with the platform engineering group, a lot of times they're wanting to ensure that from when they touch it, it's secure all the way to production. And obviously, if there's any kind of security breaches or non-standardization, the ability that everything's kind of a one-off and it's not templatized and consistent and verifiably secure every single time, they're really looking for that standardization. We're going to show you how to do that in this presentation. Some of the benefits, some of this is very specific. So for the security team, discover issues as soon as possible. The ability to provide security guardrails and do it through policies with the open policy agent. You can do that with Harness platform, and then a dashboard to see everything. For the application development teams, they're really the ability to do those security scanning before the artifact is built, consolidate and prioritize the results so you can make it actionable, and then reduce any manual overhead that they may have had to date. And then lastly, with platform engineering, the ability to automate end to end and the ability to do it in a template so that the best practices for DevSecOps are templatized and repeatable, and the ability to provide extremely granular security visibility through the entire process. So let's get into the product. So excited. And so again, remember, if you do have questions, we'd love to answer them live. So please do ask. All right, so what you're looking at here is our visual editor. So this is a pipeline that's not been run yet. So what you see here is you have the CI phase, so build, test, and pushing it to Docker, for example, and then the ability to deploy it to a development environment, or potentially leveraging GitOps to deploy it to a development environment. And then you can see, okay, well, once certain gates are met, and I'll talk about that here in a moment, you can go to the QA, and then you can do your DAS testing there. And then you can see here, we have this actual Jira integration. We have ServiceNow and Jira integrations if you're using those tools, so that you can effectively say, okay, yes, at this stage, approve it. and then you'll say, all right, we're going to go to production. So this is a nice high level. And if you like YAML, we have the ability to do the YAML right in our product. And we have the ability to kind of guide you in that YAML development if you need that. All right, so let's dig in a little more. And so what you see here in the CI phase is the ability to say, okay, let's collect the dependencies before the build is done. Then we're going to be doing, in this case, static code analysis with Sneak and with open source tools. And then based on those results, we're going to build the app. We're going to be basically reporting out what the test results were. And then the ability to do Sneak again, or SonarQube or SonarQube code coverage fully baked in. Based on those results, you're going to push that artifact up to Docker, and then use Aqua or JFrog to make sure that container is secure. And then we effectively want to reset the PR status that all these things were done. Okay, so that's sort of a quick snapshot of how we integrate before the artifact is even done, before it even hits the pipeline, and how simple that is. And so again, you can do it through YAML, or you can do it through the visual editor. Now, if we go into this version, once it's gone through that, what you will do is we have integrations with Terraform and Terraform Cloud. And so you have the ability to say, okay, well, let's go ahead and plan a deployment so we can test this out in a development environment. So you want to plan that out in Terraform, and then you want to apply that plan. And in here, we're basically going to 2 different availability zones. And then we're going to be updating a Jira ticket and a ServiceNow ticket. And then we're going to effectively roll it out. And so that's as easy as that. And so once it's rolled out, you can see we update the ticket. And then I just want to do a quick snapshot of the GitOps version so you can see what that would look like. Again, you want to create a PR. We have, I mentioned that, let me just close that for a moment. I mentioned about continuous verification. So continuous verification is an AI ML engine embedded into our platform that allows you at any point to monitor how things are going, and based on that feedback, either approve deployment or roll it back. In this case, with GitOps, you would see here that we have different deployment types. You can do rolling or canary or blue-green. That's all out of the box, not extra cost. And then here we have integrations with App Dynamics and Stackdriver. And so we would be looking at what are the results, and based on the results, take an action. And in this particular case, based on those results, you can do a automatic rollback action as well. So I just want to quickly show you how that one ways that the continuous verification works. All right, so we roll it into the QA environment. And the piece here I want to show you is the DAS testing. So as you can see here, when I clicked on the DAS, that it doesn't look like there's a whole lot here. And why is that? Because DAS testing has been templatized. So if you just go to Open Template, you're going to see here that in our DAS testing, we have 4 to 5 check marks and Veracode. And so if you're in platform engineering, this is great because you can pre-make these templates and then insert them into different processes and know that these things are versioned. You can see here that 1 is the correct version of that is stable, and that's what you want to use. You can also do this through YAML, and this standardization really is an effective tool to making sure that things are done the right way consistently. And so let's say that all passes, gets to the JIRA stage, you're going to approve it. And then I want to show you how we have integrated with the Open Policy Agent. And so right here, you can see we have this thing called risk profile. So if I click on risk profile, one of the areas, I'm going to have to show you. So anyway, that's going to be how you configure it. Let me show you something that's already run. So you can, here we go. So we've already run this test, and I'm looking at the risk profile piece here in production. And if I scroll down here, you can see that there was a policy set, and it said there should be no critical vulnerabilities from any of the tools. And so as you can see here, we are scanning all the results, and you can see here that we said, okay, well, we had looks like a critical issue here. We threw a warning, and those are all configurable, could be stopped. You could set an automated action, or you could just throw a flag that say it's a warning. You can see here that we got a warning with this open source tool, with this other Sneak tool, and Aqua as well. All right, and so having run those security tests, what kind of dashboarding would we see? This is what you would see. So this is a security testing orchestration dashboard, and there's a lot going on here. So hopefully I can kind of guide you to where the value is. One is that you can see that the last test that was run. So let's say that you made a code change, you checked it in, it started down the security testing route. This result on the very top is going to be what vulnerability was introduced with your code change. So we always show the latest result at the very top. And then when you click on it, you can see that we have where the actual issue was introduced. You can see how we're referencing that, what the recommendation is as far as remediation. And then you can see how we have identified what CVEs it's associated with. And that's all right here at your fingertips. Now, what you're looking at below is what you would consider to be the baseline of security issues in the code. And so this was what you just introduced with the latest code change that you ran through. And then these would be pre-existing CVEs. And then when you go into these, it gives you that sort of same remediation step, what the CVEs are associated with, if there is a remediation step, of course. So the other things I want to show you is you can see here all steps, or you can just say, I just want to see the issues that came up with Aqua or JFrog or with SaaS Sneak. And so it's a very robust tool that combines everything together. And again, it is, I'll go back to the all steps. When you click on this, you can see all these CVEs. So when you're not working with, when you're working with all these different scanning vendors, you're having to do all this kind of manual compiling on your own. With this tool, it makes it super easy to show how all the CVEs cross-correlate, even if they hit across different vendors. And you can see all the vendors here we're showing. So let's see what else I want to show you. All right, so I've shown you the templating. I've shown you how we're using OPA to basically understand a risk profile. And then I think the last thing I want to show you, and again, there's a lot here with our tools. So at the end, you're going to have an opportunity to interact with us. We'd love to hear from you if this looks interesting to you, is RBAC. So RBAC is, we have extremely granular RBAC. And you can see here, as far as like from the administration function, let's just go back to roles. So you can see here that you can set up a role, and the role within your DevSecOps world could be given permission to do certain parts of the overall DevSecOps process. But when you go into project administrator, of course, they have access to everything. And you can see here like what they can do as an administrator for shared resources, like can they set policy, view them, or set them, or modify them. And you can see all the different pieces they can do there. And let's go into security. So this is very important. Again, back to audit trails and security. The idea that you have an audit trail for somebody that said, I approve that this security vulnerability, I will manually pass it or reject it. You have an audit capability, and there's only certain roles. You can set people to have authority based either on the organization, only vice presidents and above can approve critical issues that go into production. So we have RBAC an ability to tie it to the organization, or you can set it down here at lower levels, but you can see who has the ability to approve or reject. I think that's enough I want to show there. So, all right. So just as an overall, I want to give enough time for Q&A. Overall, some of the business benefits of this solution is that with our CI and STO integration. That's going to really help with the software security quality. As far as the ability to do software delivery to meet those deadlines consistently, and so you're not having these variabilities of when will I hear from the security team to see what happens. You're getting that feedback as soon as you can. And because of that, be able to do fast remediation of those issues because you're seeing what those issues are. Just like I showed you, when you have that code change and what was introduced, you get that feedback immediately so that you can remediate that issue with our recommendations as far as what steps. Now, from our other side, if you're going to do CI, CD, and STO, that's going to help with increasing deployment frequency. And so the ability to, once you standardize, and that's standardize those best practices in templates, you really have this ability to go faster, but still doing it in the most secure and compliant way. And you can build in security all the way through the process. And this is great from a security team standpoint because they can see that from inception to production, complete visibility into everything that's going on. So that may be of interest to you. So if that is, you can definitely hit this QR code and hear more about our tool. And we can show you even more functionality that we can provide around the DevSecOps space and our integrations with AWS all along the way. So I want to stop there and give the opportunity for folks, if there's been some questions that have come up that may be of interest to the viewers.
Thank you, Troy. There's been a lot of questions on the list in here, and Arunav has been doing a great job on answering a lot of this. Arunav, you want to maybe chime in a couple of the questions on the list?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look. We got a lot of good questions in the chat. So just in general order of operations, there are some questions on, generally, what's the best practice with encryption, right? And how are we going to be doing things and how can AWS specifically help with that, right? In general, right? And this is a very rough rule of thumb. AES 256, that's like a very solid gold standard that, is generally going to work for a lot of data encryption needs. Using something like Secret Manager and then also beefing that up with AWS KMS, that's going to be pretty much a rock solid solution to making sure that at least for everything that's data at rest, that's going to be encrypted, keys are taken care of, and they're going to be easy to manage. Okay. As far as harness goes, right? We had some questions around, what kind of integrations can harness do, depending on what secret manager we have. Harness is going to be able to integrate with any secret manager you're using, right? There's a whole bunch of secret managers out in the market, right? Some of the biggest ones, AWS Secret Manager, that's one a lot of folks are using. HashiCorp Vault, right? That's another one. But then I think the participant who asked the question, they were specifically asking about Thycotic, right? And Harness is going to be able to integrate with any of these secret managers because we also have a provision for custom integrations, right? You could basically even have your own homegrown solution when it comes to secret management, and we'll be able to link up to it. So in general, the best practice that we're pushing all of our end users to be following is always apply secrets dynamically at runtime. And make sure you're fetching those secrets from a secret manager, right? We never want anything exposed in clear text, whether that's in Git or anywhere else. Okay. We got a very interesting question, and it was specifically around how do you compartmentalize infrastructure as code pipelines and actual software like application deployment pipelines, right? Just to recap what the question is, the participant had a perception that you have to keep those kinds of infrastructure provisioning and application deployment pipelines separate, because in general, if you were to merge those two, you now have a riskier time because now the application devs, they might be able to mess with some things on the infrastructure side that maybe the infrastructure, the cloud engineering team would not actually have approved. how do we actually, and that's going to have just ramifications not only on the infrastructure security, but it's going to have cost ramifications. It's going to just, it could mess with a lot of different things, right? And historically, right, that setup, right, and those problems have been the reason why those two pipeline types were always separated. Okay, the the workflow was that application developers can't deploy their pipeline or even run their pipeline until the infra team has actually run their own provisioning pipeline, set up all the infra. Now we can deploy. Right, that added a lot of just human-to-human communications, and it just generally just added a lot of slowdowns. Right, the harness approach to solving this is multi-part. Right, part of what Troy was showing off earlier was our RBAC system. The harness RBAC system is pretty complex. Right, there's ways that you can set up that a developer, right, they'll be able to modify segments of their pipeline that are related to building and deploying their code. But for segments of the pipeline that are related to provisioning infrastructure, right, they might just be restricted to only using the templates that the infrastructure engineering team has provided for them, right? So they need something provisioned, and they want to do it in an automated fashion. They'll just link in that template, that pre-authorized template that the infra team provides, right? That can go just serially, like sequentially inside that same pipeline that's doing the application build and deploy. And now you have a single centralized pipeline system that not only just does the app deployments, it's going to be able to handle the infrastructure provisioning. And you're going to have infra teams as well as app teams be able to get the same visibility into that same pipeline, right? Now both teams are getting the full picture view instead of being compartmentalized into just one focused view on either the infra or either the application. So that's that's a fantastic question. That's one of the biggest things that actually we're solving for a lot of our customers today. There's a lot of just friction with teams working with each other, just to get someone to manually kick off a pipeline so that someone else can manually kick off their pipeline, right? And that's what Harness is trying to speed up.
Let me just add one piece here that's really an interesting AWS integration. So at reInvent in December, Harness announced that we had spot support for a cloud cost management software module. And so what that allows you to do, let's say the infrastructure team does templatize what you are allowed to use, and let's say they've standardized on Spot. Well, we have the ability to help developers provide code for them so that we have some telemetry. And with our cloud cost management integration, we are now providing a really cost-efficient way to do that. And so that's kind of a neat integration. I know that's a little off topic from DevSecOps, but it's a nice integration that we've had with the Spot systems with a cloud cost management system that is end-to-end and it gives you something for the developer to implement in their code, and it gives you something for the platform team to templatize. And so that when that gets rolled out, you have the ability to have visibility into it, and we have that trademark auto stopping capability or auto scaling down, so we can not let just items be running without being used. So I just want to add that piece.
I just want to add to that questions, because it's a really to what Aruna mentioned, is a fantastic questions, because it's opened up a lot of part of the discussions. And the other day I was talking with a different audience about the infrastructure as code pipeline as the product itself, and that's really embodies into the ideas is that you do want to have a central team that define what is those control and guardrails, and then kind of productize that into the pipelines. The mechanism could be, for example, by having CloudFormation templates or maybe Terraform modules that have to be used as part of the pipelines. And then you do the checks in the pipeline to ensure that, for example, those modules are in use. If there is a different way for you to create a VPC, it will be rejected, for example. That's a good example of how you can kind of give that flexibility for them to define, for example, how they want to set up their VPC, but it has to use, for example, a modules as it's been provided. So yeah, historically, as I mentioned, like if you look from coming from like an on-premise world, a lot of that is kind of decoupled. But if you look at modern cloud applications today, a lot of it actually is a serverless, right? And when you look at serverless, the serverless infrastructure itself is almost part of your code. If you look at Lambda, for example, SNS and SKS, so we kind of blurry a little bit the line between what is infrastructure pipeline versus your application pipelines. Because if you are using framework, for example, like a SAM or serverless access model, your infrastructure and your code is actually sitting in the same repository, essentially. Of course, there's going to be complementary infrastructures that has to be paved and defined separately. That could be maybe the supporting VPC and maybe the supporting accounts itself. And that could be managed by the different teams completely, of course, depending on the size of your organizations. But more and more, you can see that those lines getting blurry, and it's not for the bad things. It's essentially you kind of try to use tools to kind of help automate that. And I think the demo that Troy provided earlier with Harness kind of embodies some of those basic principle as well.
And if you're going down that serverless route, we are announcing AWS SAM support as well as Lambda support for our CD product. And so I know a lot of times CD products are kind of lagging in that serverless space as far as, okay, great, I know how to do serverless, but how do we get it deployed? So we've got great integrations with AWS just around the corner. So that's another sign of our partnership. Okay, anything else that you saw, Anurag, that was interesting to address?
Yeah, there's one question that I think it's good to go over. Someone asked, we've talked about 3 different security tools, and actually even in our demo pipeline, we had quite more than 3 scanners occurring. The question was, can one tool not handle all the security scans, right? Like why do we have to add so many, right? And actually, when I first looked into this, DevSecOps security scanning space, like I had the same question myself, right? And the answer is generally a lot of these scanners, right, they're tied to either a specific language or framework, or they're tied to finding vulnerabilities in a specific aspect of the application, right? This vulnerability aspect could be the open source packages that are being leveraged inside the code base. It could be vulnerabilities that are found in whatever base image that we're building the container off of, right? Or any extra packages that we have to add into the container. Or it could even just be spanning things like when we actually deploy this container, what kind of ports did we leave open and unsecured, right? Is there any port traffic that is not being monitored? Are there any ways that there could be just weird data injections and possible hijacks on the container through some like port openings, those kind of stuff? Generally there's not one tool that does it all, although there's quite a few solutions that are now trying to branch out and do more and more of what I just mentioned, and actually even more than that. So that's why typically you'll see in a lot of large organizations there's many different scanners, right? Because there's definitely going to be multiple languages that are being developed in, right? And so typically organizations will grow from one scanner, maybe just starting with a basic container scan, and then start growing into code base, static analysis, that kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect as well. Like as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, is that you want to understand what's your organization needs and not just deploy a scanner or tool for the sake of deploying it, right? So you have to making sure you map what is the requirements from the organizations, and then how does tool actually translate to those scans and checks. And that's when you will see some kind of like overlaps as well in terms like the tool and the scan coverage. And I think what's really important as well to also understand the like a risk level between the applications, because there are some tools where or applications that you may find a bunch of vulnerability, but it may not be applicable because there's are potentially a development or maybe an internal systems where other tools or other applications might have lower severity vulnerability, but because of maybe the risk factor or something else, that might be should be the one that you prioritize as part of your practice. So having a good coverage is important, but also is more important to understand how that coverage translate to the organization requirements in terms like whatever framework that you use.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think we show a lot of tools just because we have so many, but we're really we have integrations with such a large ecosystem, and but the key is that you really want to try to see how you can kind of leverage the automation piece, right? And some of the deduplication that we have, because we hear a lot of customers. It's not an easy process, especially when you're going across vendors. To compile everything together and make it useful and actionable. So, okay. Well, we do have 5 minutes left. So if there are more questions, burning questions, please submit them and we'll address them live. The one piece of I saw that one participant asked about test intelligence. Anurav gave a great answer to that. The only piece I would add to that answer would be that you are free if after our code analysis and we say, hey, we recommend that you only run these tests, you can add more tests to that. And so that's not a hard recommendation. It's really a suggestion that you can use, or you can add more tests like, hey, we always have to run these, even if it doesn't map directly to our code changes or interdependencies. And so just to let you know that you are flexible to do that. Awesome. I really appreciate everybody being interactive. A lot of times at webinars, and hopefully, it really does help and be able to give you what you really are looking for and need.
Yeah, thank you again for the audience. I think it's been a great discussion. A lot of great questions as well. I don't have anything else from my side. Troy, or maybe Cody, over to you, perhaps.
So I just want to remind everyone that our session was recorded. So should you want to rewatch this program, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Or of course, you can find it living on our DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. Troy, Welly, did I happen to see one more question come in, or was that
potential? If you see it, you can ask it.
I don't see it though.
All right. Well, it looks like we did cover them all. So Troy, Welly, was there anything that you'd like to leave us before we do go off the air?
No, I think to me, just thanks for having me. It's been a great discussions. Thanks again for the interactions and a lot of good questions. Troy?
Yeah, just so happy about our AWS partnership, and just thrilled to be able to show you kind of DevSecOps in a box. So we're really trying to make this, secure, kind of really help accelerate your compliance journey and really make this work for customers wherever they are. So Harness is was really excited to be a part of this.
Awesome. Well, Troy and Welly, thank you both for not only your time today, but your dedication to putting together the presentation and answering all of the questions. And Aronov, thank you so much for your support on the back end as well. We really appreciate you helping us with those Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Lizette H, Wes W, Santoso B, and Karen F. So to our 4 winners, keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. It should make its way to your inbox in about the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see it, just check your spam folder in case it gets filtered out. I'd like to thank AWS and Harness for being our sponsor for our program today. And to our audience who's been with us for the past hour, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and we want to hear your feedback. As soon as we close out, there will be a survey. Feel free to give us your responses. We'd like to know what you liked about our program today, or perhaps what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. Either way, we hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day. And Troy, Welly, Arnav, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.